Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Kep, co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to today's webinar. We're excited about today's topic, which is about how employers can nurture well-being among their employees, even as they expand in size and scope. But before we get started, I want to share something special we have for today's attendees. One of our monthly virtual conferences is coming up on Wednesday, April 6th, and it's titled Managing the Human Impact of Digital Transformation. It's going to be particularly relevant for employers who are transitioning to new digital tools that are coming online and who are monitoring the varied and influential effect of this change on employees. Thanks to our partners, including today's sponsor, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those who join today's webinar, and that would be you. I'm putting a link in the chat right now. This is worth taking advantage of because the regular price of our conference tickets is $149, and this link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole day's activities. Now, today we'll be exploring the topic of how to build and maintain employee well-being at scale. So we'll be asking, what happens when you combine a pre-existing mental health crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, a great resignation, and the pressures to act like everything's okay? It puts a newfound spotlight on your organization's employee well-being strategy. BetterUp Care will share with us a more complete view of mental health and well-being trends in global organizations, what people are experiencing, why today's solutions are falling short, and how you can provide every person in your organization with personalized, preventative mental health fitness support before expensive and time-consuming interventions are needed. You'll discover a few things. One is what we know about languishing and how it impacts people at work, the latest data and research from BetterUp Labs on employee well-being, thriving, and mental fitness, and how it fuels performance, and a new proactive approach to building mental fitness and well-being capable of meeting employee needs in this new era of work. So you've heard me mention BetterUp. They are our sponsor today, and I'll tell you a bit about them. BetterUp Care helps employees build mental fitness to support their growth and transformation journey. As a proactive approach to mental health, BetterUp Care partners with organizations to help employees build the coping mechanisms they need to manage stress and anxiety that might be around the corner, and continuously move toward greater states of thriving, no matter where they are in the mental health curve. Through a combination of coaching, content, and community, BetterUp Care helps people build the growth mindsets needed to thrive. Now, a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link to that video. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for the session from the Society of Human Resource Management. And look out for a written account of the conversation on our website at fromday1.co. So for the audience, a special note, around 45 minutes into the webinar, we'll be having a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime you think of them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Marissa Berman is a solutions consultant at BetterUp, where she works to advance the science and practice of evidence-based coaching and behavior transformation in the workplace. Marissa has more than 10 years of experience working with executives, leaders, and teams to increase individual team and organizational effectiveness. Before joining BetterUp, Marissa served as an organization development psychologist and consultant at the VHA, National Center for Organization Development, for a decade. So with no further ado, Dr. Berman, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. So hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marissa Berman. As Steve mentioned, I am a solutions consultant and senior behavioral scientist at BetterUp. I'm also a licensed clinical psychologist. I am so excited to chat with you today about how to build and maintain employee well-being at scale. So just give me 1 minute and I'm going to share my screen so we can move forward. All right, I'm opening up my Q&A and chat. Okay, can everyone see the screen properly? I'm not getting any negative feedback, so I'm going to assume you can. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to kick us off with a personal story that highlights why well-being and one of its primary components, mental health is so very important. So I started my career as a professional athlete on the US ski team for a sport called inverted aerials. It's a sport where you ski off a jump and you flip and twist about 50 feet in the air before landing on a steep slope below. I learned really early on how foundational strong mental health and well-being are to performance. And it inspired an entire career that focuses on the intersection of these very critical areas. What I learned was that when my mental health and well-being were strong, it literally helped me to fly through the air with the greatest of ease. But when my mental health and well-being were low, it was hard to focus, hard to manage emotions like fear, frustration, self-criticism, and it made it so much more likely that I would crash and burn with disastrous consequences. So what I saw in myself and my teammates was that strong mental health and well-being were essential for performance. It's true in sport and it's true in all of life, including at work. If we're languishing, it's difficult to be present, do our work, collaborate, and get along with others, manage the complexities of life, learn, and grow. Now multiply that individual experience by your entire workforce, and you'll get a sense of why this is so important, especially at scale. What we need now more than ever is support to build and maintain strong mental health and well-being to unlock our performance and our potential in and out of work. And that's why we created BetterUp Care. But before we go any further, let's get to know a little bit more about your organization with a few very quick polls. So our first poll question that should pop up on your screen is, how would you describe the current mental health and well-being of your workforce? So tell us what you see when you look out over your employee population. We're going to wait a minute as you log your results. And this is a single choice. We're going from perfect to thriving, okay, not great, on the decline or languishing, to in distress. And when we've got a bit of a quorum, our results should pop up on our screen, or so I'm told. All right, so we have our results. You should be able to see them, but we've got very few with perfect, 1%, 6% thriving, about 64% okay, not great, 21% on the decline, and 9% in distress. That's actually higher than what I thought we would see. So it sounds like your workforces are doing actually better than average. And we are ready for our next poll question. So what is your biggest challenge in building employee mental health and well-being? This next poll should pop up on your screen. And we came up with these responses based on what we hear as the most common challenges from our partners. So your options for this single choice are work-life balance and burnout, remote work, restricted resources, engagement, or all of the above. What is your biggest challenge in building employee mental health and well-being? And when we've got a quorum, our results should pop up. And it looks like work-life balance and burnout takes the lead with 41%, followed by 32%, all of the above, engagement 16%, restricted resources 9%, and remote work 3%. Thank you for weighing in here. We should be able to talk about not only resources to meet your entire workforce where they are, whether they're languishing to flourishing, but as well how to address those challenges that you just mentioned. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit more about what we do to build employee mental health and well-being at scale. And we love to start with our philosophy. So at BetterUp, we believe that everyone is born with potential, innate talent, passion, and curiosity. And realizing this potential brings people meaning and fulfillment. But the work of realizing our potential is not easy. And it's a journey that even the best of the best need support to navigate. To help us manage difficulties and challenges, both external and internal, and build strong mental health and well-being so we can show up as our best selves in work and in life. But the problem is the resources available to us to build our mental health and well-being are often limited, difficult to access, and take a reactive approach. Despite the field's focus on investing in clinical mental health services over the past several decades, common offerings like therapy just aren't for everyone. But everyone, and I mean everyone, needs help in one way or another. We need help to get ahead of stressful triggers. We need help to learn how to press the pause button once in a while. We need help to break free from old patterns that are holding us back. And we need help to rise to new challenges. And when we shift from a reactive to a proactive approach to building mental health and well-being, help takes on a different form. And that's what we provide with BetterUp Care, help for employees everywhere. But let's step back and talk about how most of us are actually doing in terms of our mental health and well-being. This curve you see here represents where employees fall on the mental health continuum from languishing to flourishing. And this was from our own BetterUp research data. We found that the majority of the workforce, or 60%, is actually in a state of languishing, which means low or poor mental health. And to be clear here, low mental health is different from mental illness, just like lagging physical health is different from physical illness. But we still need to pay attention to it because languishing impacts how we show up in every facet of our lives, from Zoom meetings to parenting. When we're languishing, we're just not at our best. Everything is harder, even the basics. And it has very far-reaching and specific implications for how we show up at work. And I'd love to talk about those implications in a little more detail. I think it's fair to say that most of us have a pretty vague understanding of what mental health actually is. But what it actually means is our emotional and cognitive capacity. So our ability to be present, to manage and direct our thoughts and emotions, to maintain perspective about what's most important, and to respond to the challenges of each moment with intentional and constructive actions. So at BetterUp, we use scientifically validated assessments to track the capabilities or building blocks that underlie mental health in our members, or that's what we call our participants. And that's what you see represented in these bar charts up on your screen. While it's alarming to us that scores in these areas are showing a steep decline over the past few years, it is also not surprising. The downward trend is aligned with the toll that the last few years have taken on our mental health. And if we pay attention to predictions from the American Psychological Association and other informed entities, it's only likely to get worse unless we find adequate solutions to build mental health in our workforce at scale. What organizations need to know, and what we want all of you to know, is that these building blocks of mental health, they're also critical capabilities that predict performance and our ability to contribute to healthy and thriving work cultures. So a CHRO we recently shared this data with, she said it perfectly. She said, how can we expect our workforce to lead, change, and drive innovation? Their capacity for success is compromised. And we agree. Our biggest problem, and I referred to this earlier in the introduction, is that there hasn't been sufficient resources to address the challenges that this new era of work represents for employee mental health and well-being. What's commonly available are behavioral health and digital solutions that are primarily focused on clinical needs, take a reactive approach, or are just not sticky enough to build real behavior change. The bottom line is that this has left a really big gap in the support that's needed for the majority of our workforce. And it's kept a lot of us stuck. Or worse, it's led to personal and professional crises that could have been prevented with the right kind of support. What we need now, more than ever, is a new approach capable of building the mental strength we need to manage challenges, enable peak performance, build productive working relationships, and create organizations that employees seek out and where they want to remain. We believe this approach needs to be preventative and proactive, capable of meeting employees' needs across the spectrum of mental health and well-being, from languishing to flourishing, and on a broad range of topics with both human and digital supports. At BetterUp, we call this approach mental fitness. And if you're wondering how effective mental fitness is within organizations, we would love to tell you. So here's a brief case vignette that summarizes our results in just 4 months of employing our mental fitness approach within a large global technology company. Like most organizations, the last few years have taken their toll on employee mental health and well-being. And the digital and clinical offerings that they had were just not meeting employee needs, especially across cultures and regions. And we saw great results in just 4 months. And that included a 35% improvement in well-being for those who started out low, 18% improvement in coping, which refers to our ability to manage stress, obtain work-life balance, and build resilience. And we also saw a 26% improvement in adaptability, which refers to our ability to manage emotions while focusing on what matters. And the quote on the right brings these stats to life. So just take a minute to read through. And if you can raise your hand to let me know when you're finished, that would be great. If not, I'm just going to kind of ballpark how much time you would need. Okay, I think we can move on. So if you remember that curve I shared earlier, this is what the mental fitness curve looked like for that technology company I just mentioned at the start of their BetterUp Care experience. You can see that the peak of the curve is far over to the left, indicating that most people are in the lowest categories of mental fitness. In other words, the majority of their employees were languishing at the start of their BetterUp Care experience. This second curve, it represents the number of people in each mental fitness category after only 4 months of engaging with BetterUp Care. You can see that the peak of the second curve has been shifted to the right of the first curve, indicating that more members have higher mental fitness scores after engaging in BetterUp Care. And we know that this shift makes a difference because our own research shows us that compared to those who are low, employees with the highest levels of mental fitness have fewer missed days of work for health reasons, higher engagement, higher productivity, and they're much more likely to be rated as a top performer. But the power of mental fitness is even broader than what I shared so far, because if you really dig into the research on mental health and well-being, you'll see that it's not only connected to health outcomes and keeping mental and physical illness at bay, but it's connected to almost every business outcome we care about at work, like productivity, performance, engagement, teamwork, belonging, retention, and our ability to learn, grow, innovate, and change. That's why we say that mental fitness is the foundation for flourishing in work and life. On the individual level, it helps us to show up at our best as our best selves, personally and professionally. And on an organizational level, it's at the heart of what makes organizations great. And if you need more convincing of the power of mental fitness, here's an example from one of our BetterUp Care members. And I'll let you read this to yourself and give you a little break from my voice. Hopefully you don't need too much of a break. And here's another. Okay, so while we hope you've liked what you've learned so far about BetterUp Care, we also know that it's not enough just to have the right solution. Because of the lack of awareness and stigma around mental health and well-being, we work with organizations to build a movement around mental fitness that helps employees to understand why their mental health and well-being is so important and what building it can do for them personally and professionally. And this movement, it excites, motivates, and inspires employees to engage with BetterUp Care. We call this our movement maker strategy, and it's an integral part of our launch and our ability to build mental health and well-being at scale. So we work in collaboration with our partners to leverage best practices in change management and develop a movement maker strategy that meets the specific needs of each organization. Let me tell you a little bit more about what our movement maker strategy actually looks like in practice. So first, we create buzz by helping leaders and managers understand what mental fitness is, why it's so important for them and their teams, and how to build a culture that supports and celebrates mental fitness. We also inspire employees to take action around their mental fitness through a robust campaign that leverages communications from both BetterUp and from our partners. We also integrate with existing channels, resources, and events, so employees have multiple opportunities to learn about BetterUp Care. And we don't just focus on the launch. We engage in quarterly campaigns and provide seasonal content to inspire members to build their mental fitness at all times. This ensures that employees are not only engaging with BetterUp Care, but that we're truly building a movement of mental fitness within your organization that helps everyone to show up at their best. So we're going to switch gears slightly here. We've covered our positioning, our approach, and our results. Now let's dive in to the employee experience, or what employees need to build and maintain their mental health and well-being. First, we meet each employee where they are by offering support on a broad range of mental health and well-being topics, including what you see listed on the screen: sleep, nutrition, stress and burnout, working parents, professional growth, diversity, inclusion and belonging, productivity and performance. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And with the power of AI and machine learning and the human touch of care guides and coaches, we craft a unique plan for every employee and guide them on their own mental fitness journeys. So each member's care plans and programs are as beautifully diverse as they are and enable them to flow in and out of BetterUp's various resources and modalities. So speaking of modalities, coaching is one of our most popular options for support. So members have the opportunity to meet with a one-to-one mental fitness coach, as well as other specialized coaches in areas like nutrition, sleep, working parents. We're just about to add grief to the lineup. And we offer certified coaches who are expertly trained in well-being related topics. Many of them have mental health degrees or licenses, but they're never acting in a clinical role as a BetterUp coach because our services are designed to be proactive and preventative. We pride ourselves on finding the right fit in terms of coach for each member, and we actually have a coach matching algorithm that does the hard work of coach matching. We also have a diverse community of coaches with 27% self-reporting as BIPOC, and we're also currently supporting 70 countries and in 65 languages through coaching. So in addition to coaching, members can also make progress on their mental fitness through a mix of engaging digital interactive experiences, like our dynamic live 25-minute studio workshops on topics like finding peace in the chaos or making change fun. There are also quick evidence-based mental fitness digital exercises, like a restful 5-minute mindfulness experience, as well as many others. And we also have a variety of articles and resources on topics like the space between self-esteem and self-compassion. Members can, sorry, I skipped over one thing. Our members can also participate in communities of support in the platform. So in community forums, you can stay connected to other BetterUp members in real time and on topics that range from parenting, caregiving, developing healthy habits, and increasing your productivity. And here's a really unique attribute. So our care guides can connect members to other employer benefits that meet their needs outside of BetterUp Care. So this includes connecting members to their own EAPs, insurance information, resources for new parents, legal support, or any other resources that our partners want us to offer to their workforce. So we drive utilization of other employee benefits that so often go unused because we can offer them to employees precisely when they need them most. And finally, I've referenced this role already, but members also have access to our care guides who help them to navigate the many options they have available for growth on as well as off the platform. Our care guides act as advisors, cheerleaders, connectors, and are also equipped to handle crisis assessment. Their job is to make sure each member has support to find the right resources at the right time. Okay, we are heading into the home stretch at this point, and this is the last area that we want to cover with you, our partner experience. So to ensure our partner experience is delightful and seamless, we offer our partners a robust team of support. And while the primary team consists of our account executive, account manager, and customer success manager, we also have deployment managers who handle the technical readiness and launch logistics, growth marketers, senior behavioral scientists, and people insights consultants who work with you not only to build the movement, but share deep insights and growth over time using our robust data and analytics capabilities. And speaking of data, while protecting privacy and anonymity, we provide leading indicators to help our partners keep a pulse on what emerging needs and risks are showing up across their organization. We also track growth over time. So progress is both quantifiable and visible. And our data is provided back to our partners in real time through our people analytics dashboard that partners always have access to, and through our quarterly business reviews, where we take a deep dive into the data to answer questions that are most meaningful to our partners. We have gone through a lot, so I want to briefly summarize our high level message. So if you remember nothing else, please remember that mental fitness builds and maintains strong mental health and well-being, so your employees can show up at their best. And BetterUp Care builds mental fitness for your entire workforce. All right, and that's the end of our presentation. I think we're ready to move into questions.
Yes, indeed. Hi, Marissa. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. We have some questions from the audience, and I want to encourage the audience to contribute as we go, all the questions that you might have. And let's look at what we have here. The first one would be, from Tiffany in the audience is asking, you mentioned mental health is one component of well-being. What are the other components of well-being?
Yeah, Tiffany, I love that question. It's such an important one. So well-being, well, I would say there is no one accepted definition of well-being. There are many camps on this, but I think one of the most accessible conceptualizes well-being in terms of our mental health, and you can further break that down into our cognitive and emotional health. And then the two additional components are our social health and our physical health. So that's our favorite, and we feel like most easily accessible and actionable definition and conceptualization of well-being.
Great. Now, what about the people in crisis? What happens to them in your model as opposed to people who are just being preventative and looking out for themselves? How do you respond to them? Maybe you could show some different kinds of crisis and how you'd respond.
Yeah, Steve, that's a great question. And you're right, there's different kinds of crisis. So if we kind of identify or define crisis as someone who needs acute support or resources in the moment, someone who may be, for example, at risk or to harming themselves or others because of their current state. We do have our care guides who are able to do crisis and risk assessment and are able to connect members to the appropriate resources. We also provide, depending on country, there are always crisis hotlines and numbers. And so we make sure that's built into our platform as well. So members have that served up to them. And our coaches as well are able to help members get connected to crisis resources in the moment. So those kind of three areas, our care guides, our coaches, and resources that are baked into the platform. If we kind of think about it in a different way, as someone who may need a higher level of support or care that is considered to be clinical, as well, our coaches are trained to be able to know the line between mental health coaching and clinical level support, or what's considered to be therapy, and they're able to help direct the member to resources they have available to them. Most likely, this would be a coach connecting to a member to a care guide, and our care guides, as part of our onboarding process, we train them to know all of our partners' resources, their EAP information, their insurance information, and really any other benefit that our partnering organizations want their employees to know about. And not only will our care guides kind of provide that information, but they will also be like a warm hand to hold to navigate through the process. Because if you've ever had to connect to therapy, to clinical level support, it's not easy. It can be really confusing. And it can also take a little while because there's such a great need and often limited resources in terms of clinical support.
Mm-hmm. So instead of the employee or patient or person being coached having to go online, look all around to find, like, or on their company website for benefits, the care guide knows this, how to navigate this.
Yep. It's part of our onboarding process for each partner. So our care guides have like a menu of what's available to them, and they are trained to know your organization's benefits information, not only where it exists, but how to navigate through. And I think that's really such a good point. So few people that we talk to in terms of employees actually know what's available to them, right, and even where to go to find it. So we find that is a very valuable and helpful service we provide, not only to members, but to our partnering organizations as well.
Great. Here's a question that's more conceptual, but intriguing. How do you build a mental health movement in an organization?
Yeah, so we covered some of this in the presentation. Yeah. I think you have to start with the acknowledgement that so few people actually understand what mental health and well-being are. So you need to start there to build awareness of what it is and kind of desire an incentive to participate, to build it, help people understand the benefit to them, because we're all busy, right? We're all overscheduled. So many things are going on in our personal and professional lives. So we do need to start with giving people the what and the why for building their mental health and well-being, even before we offer them resources. Otherwise, they're just not going to use it. So kind of on a conceptual level, you do have to start there with understanding kind of the current state of mental health and well-being literacy. And then you want to use best practices from the change management literature, or what we know that helps people to adopt new behaviors to actually make a change. So that's what we bake into our movement maker approach and strategy. And it leverages, I would say, best practices to help people understand what it is, why it's so important, and then where to go for resources. And this involves a robust communications campaign that includes messaging both from BetterUp and from strategic players within a partnering organization, as well as a tiered launch rollout that starts with launching to leaders and managers to help them understand the what and the why of mental fitness for them and their teams. There's more I could say, but we'll leave it at that for now.
We have a few more questions, so let's get to those. Here's one that comes up often. How does what you're providing or your kind of care compared to an EAP?
Yeah, so we are different than an EAP, but complementary. So I mentioned a few times that our approach is proactive and preventative mental health and well-being support. EAPs provide kind of a variety of offerings, but one of the ways they are most utilized is for a set number of therapy sessions, clinical level therapy. So that's not what we provide. And yet, like I mentioned, we are complementary. And because EAPs are actually used so little, estimates are between like 3 and 5% for a lot of organizations, we can drive people there when that's what they want and need.
Oh, good. Okay. Here's another one. Lots of companies, as we've all seen in the headlines in the last few days, are announcing plans to return to workplaces, like for real this time, fingers crossed, maybe we mean it. So what issues should companies be watching out for if they're really making this transition happen? People are already stressed. They should be on the lookout. What's your advice there?
Yeah. So that is a great question. And I would say they're not just returning to go back to work, but they're returning to go back to work layered on top of everything that we've been through over the past few years, and everything that we're currently going through. So I would say this is, and I'll back up and say, in addition to that, like, we don't love change, right? Like, it's going to impact people's our routines, our kind of systems, all of those things. So even for the people who are most excited to return to work, it's likely going to be stressful as well because it's going to involve a change. So I would think about that as one additional stressor, layering on top of all the other stressors that we have endured. And I did mention this in the presentation, but like, what happens with stress and the experiences that we've gone through when we're done, so when we get to stop wearing masks, and when COVID is no longer an issue, it's not like everything's fine again. There's a lag. So if you do look to informed entities like the American Psychological Association and others, there is likely going to be a long tail of impact in terms of the impact to our mental health, well-being, stress, resilience, all of those things. So I think, short answer, employees should see return to work as an additional stressor on top of everything else. So just another reason to support their employees and their own unique mental health and well-being needs.
Sounds like that's very timely advice. Here's a good one. How do you account for diversity and inclusion within your services? I think you mentioned BIPOC coaches, real personalized approach in terms of background. But what about programming?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think a couple of things to say at the outset. 27% of our coaching population does identify as BIPOC. And outside of that, we match individuals with coaches by language and region to ensure that not only are coaches able to meet an employee by using their native language, but also understand the cultural context in which they exist. So those things are very important to us. And I would say we have a 97% coach matching success rate using algorithm that includes language, region, time zones, interests, etc. And we give people 3 options. But if someone is not satisfied with the coach matching process, they can reach out to customer care and ask for specific backgrounds, identities, etc. to meet their needs. But we also have internal training that we provide to our coaches to ensure that they provide culturally relevant and sensitive support.
That's great. And then this is one that comes off a poll. Looks like they were inspired by that, which is for workers who haven't before felt that they were doing, quote, okay, but not great. What questions should they ask themselves before they seek help? What, in terms of why, how do I self-diagnosis a little bit?
For workers who haven't before felt that they're doing okay, what questions? So I'm trying to unpack. For workers who've never before felt that they were in a state of languishing.
Yeah, they've always done fine and just skated through. But now, with everything that's happened in the last 2 years, not to mention events in the world, some people there may be some newcomers to that okay, not great feeling.
So I mean, I think the biggest question is, what will be possible if I could show up as my best self, right? Like, is okay, not great acceptable? Like, is that good enough for me and like my life's experience? And it's really interesting. So the tools and the skills and the services we provide, they're not only designed to help those who are languishing to improve, but even help those who are feeling like they're doing really well, to get to that next level, to be able to show up at their best, to better manage and juggle all of the things we need to juggle in as members of the modern workforce, and humans in addition to that. So I don't know that I've ever met a person who wouldn't benefit from bolstering their mental fitness. And an analogy here is, if you think about someone who is at the peak of their physical fitness, they can't just stop there, right? Like if you're like, all right, I've arrived, and then you, I don't know, eat fast food every day for the next year, or stop working out, or stop putting effort into practicing physical fitness, that level of physical health is not likely to be maintained. And so we want people to think about mental fitness in the same way. The proactive, preventative work you do to show up at your best for yourself, for your family, for your teams, etc. But usually we find a lot of success by just asking the question, what would be possible for you if you were able to show up as your best self, if you had just a little bit more focus, just a little bit more ability to be present and be there, and show up for your life, for your family, for your friends, for your loved one, for yourself. And that usually provides a lot of perspective and motivation.
Okay, that is exactly what I think that person was looking for for an answer. So here's one that's a little more of a business question from Joanna in the audience. She says, this sounds like this program, or this kind of program, will run with very little resources from the company. In other words, the benefits department. Is that correct? How much involvement would it take from the company?
Gosh, okay. So I would love to set you up with one of our deployment managers and an AE to kind of run through this. But I believe that it takes about 4 weeks for us to deploy. And we intentionally set up our system to be a very light lift for our partnering organizations. And just to make sure I don't kind of misspeak or speak out of turn, because that's not necessarily my direct role, I would love to leave it there and invite you to learn more with one of our AEs and deployment managers.
Great. Okay. Well, there are several questions from audience members like, what does this cost? And how can I get more information? And can I buy these services a la carte? So that sounds like a good answer to cover all those things, and those people's questions can be addressed. Now here's one. How do you balance the competing needs of scaling well-being benefits and then keeping them appropriately personalized? I think you touched on this in the presentation, certainly, but it sounds like a little bit of reiteration or expansion is being asked for here.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we do this? How do we keep it personalized and at scale? There's a couple things there. One, we do have a robust onboarding assessment that helps that asks people what they're interested in learning about, how they're interested in engaging. So right from the outset, we're able to connect people to certain types of content that match what they say they are looking for. And I think, I would also say our offering of both digital and human supports is a big one there, and not even just like one type of human support. I mentioned our one-to-one coaching. So we have our generalist mental fitness coaches who are capable of providing broad support around building mental health and well-being, but we also have these specialist coaches who act in more of an expert. This is the right way to do things. So certified nutritionists, certified sleep experts. I mentioned that grief is being added, working parents specialists. So we offer a lot of different types of support. We also offer group coaching, which I didn't mention in the course of our presentation.
Oh, good.
We have these drop-in one-time studio sessions, which are designed to be almost like a Peloton for your mind on a specific type of mental health and well-being topic. And then, of course, there's the care guides who are trained to talk to people and get a better sense of their goals, of their needs, of their wants, of their interests, and say, I have the thing for you. So I think it's a balance of AI, digital and human experts and modalities, and then that human touch with the care guides, whose role is to help people to navigate.
All right, that's a good answer. Here's one that comes up sometimes in other venues, but it seems like it's certainly one that's relevant given the sort of lingering stigma about mental health, which is, hi, doctor. Do you have thoughts on ways companies can encourage their employees to actually use their mental health benefits? It seems like people sometimes need a push or a nudge, but how can we do that appropriately?
Yeah, so that is a great question and is super aligned with our movement maker strategy, where we seek to really not even redefine, because it's pretty murky for a lot of people, like what is mental health actually? What is mental health actually? Yeah. So we partner with our organizations to really do an organization-wide basically movement maker approach, where we seek to define mental health and well-being, what it actually is and why it's so important. And from those perspectives, we're using those levers I mentioned before. And so that's, I think, a major piece of what's needed. And even in the most progressive countries our mental health literacy is really poor, right? And so we have to go in and we have to take a really active approach to defining it. And that includes communications, that includes events, that includes helping managers and leaders to understand, what mental health and well-being are, why it's so important, and getting them to speak about what it is, the benefits, etc. So this is really baked into our movement maker strategy. And then within that, I mentioned that we train our care guides to, recommend additional organizational benefits, to include therapy offered through EAP insurance, etc. And so our care guides will talk to people on a one-to-one level, learn more about what they need, and then be able to say, gosh, it seems like this is really going to help you get to where you want to go or meet your need. So it's this robust, higher level organizational change management approach, as well as that individual touch, meeting people where they are and helping to connect them with their mental health resources when they need it. But that is a great question. Incredibly important.
Excellent. And here's one that we're about to come into the 2-year anniversary of the pandemic. It's March 11th, I think, is the day a lot of people observe. So the question is, how does the pandemic change the way we think of preventative care, not just mental health in general, but preventative care? Is there a greater need for it, even as present crises continue to add up?
Yeah. So I mentioned I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm biased on this. We've always needed preventative care, right? It's mental health has always been important. So if you look at kind of global mental health, even pre-pandemic, I think it's fair to say that there was a global mental health crisis even before the pandemic happened. Like it was really low. What the pandemic has done is like brought that to the surface because it's even further exacerbated, something that was already really low. And so I would say if there's any silver lining to the pandemic, that would be it. Like we're talking about it, we're so much aware of it, and the need to address it. So preventative, proactive, always been important. And, we talked about languishing in our presentation, and we mentioned that low mental health does not equate to mental illness, but it is a risk factor for developing not only mental illness, but physical illness. So, a lot of us are languishing right now. That's what our curve showed. That's what, a lot of the research says. And so if like that should be almost like enough, incentive for needing or wanting to provide proactive and preventative mental health support to keep mental and physical illness at bay, but also to be able to show up as our best selves every day. When we're languishing, it's so hard to focus. It's hard to do our work. It's hard to connect with our teammates, our direct reports, work on difficult and complex projects on tight deadlines, let alone do additional work of like learning, growing, changing, innovating, all the things that companies want us to do. So I might have gotten lost in terms of the purpose of the question, but preventative care and support is so needed now more than ever.
Well, you got there. that was I think what we were asking about. And now in the couple minutes that we have left, I have a question. It's a little bit off script, but it comes back to your introduction, which is we don't usually have on a webinar someone who's both a clinical psychologist and someone who is a competitor at the US ski team level. And I'm just wondering, this was a remarkable year in which we saw people at the peak of their sports. A certain Olympic skier, a gymnast, a tennis player who are like just rock solid at the top level, who had mistakes and were very open about what the implications might be for mental health. What resonated with you? I know there's a Goldwater rule where for a professional, you can't comment on the mental health of someone else, but just in general, it was, what did you think?
Yeah, I love that professional athletes are talking about mental health and well-being. It's because they are role models and champions for all of us. So one, I think that's really amazing. And two, I think it normalizes that even for the best of the best, when our mental health and well-being are low, we're not able to use those skills that we've worked so hard to develop. So someone who's the greatest of all time in their sport, if their mental health and well-being is low, they're just not able to use the skills that they have. And and I think this goes back to like actually understanding the definition of mental health and well-being as our cognitive and an emotional health and capacity. That includes our ability to focus, regulate our emotions, get out of our heads and into the present moment, so we can kind of focus on the ski hill or the whatever apparatus or sport we're engaging in. And I think it provides just not only great role model, but a great example of why mental health and well-being are so critical. If it's low, even when we're an expert in our field, it gets in the way of us using the skills and abilities that we have.
Great. So even if your ski hill is a spreadsheet, it still matters. So, well, great. This was terrific. Thank you so much. We're at time at this point. So thank you to Dr. Berman. It was a terrific, engaging presentation. Thanks to the audience for so many great questions. I'd like to thank again our sponsor, BetterUp, and to all of you who participated today. If you'd like to join us at From Day One for more virtual events, you can head to our website at fromday1.co and check out more of our upcoming webinars. On Tuesday, I'll mention a couple. Tuesday, March 8th, we'll be talking about improving the talent pipeline from end to end. The next day, March 9th, we'll have our monthly conference where we will be talking about how to enhance total rewards to fit the workforce's new expectations. And on Tuesday, March 15th, we'll be talking about talent without boundaries, finding remote workers wherever they live. So on behalf of From Day One, thank you. Thanks, everyone, and stay well.